Welcome to Connected Conversations. I am Elena Petrova, founder and CEO of Industry Inc. Let's share the inspiring stories, strengthen our bonds, and pave the way for a brighter future, one conversation at a time. Welcome to Connected Conversations. And today we are back to DC. And I have this incredibly interesting guest sitting with us, Atul Singh. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm not going to even try to introduce you well because you're such an interesting figure in my life. Historian.
A second-rate one. I study history. I'm not a historian. But I love history. That is true. And I have some historical education.
Some historical education, to say the least. When we talk about history and with everything that is happening in the world today, can we really say that we learn from history?
I would say that the only thing we can say is that human beings tend not to learn from history, or the only thing they have learned is learning not to learn from history. And we are sitting in Washington, which is the capital of a young country, a modern superpower, a modern empire, some would say. And here, the lack of historical knowledge is extraordinary. People repeat the same mistakes of earlier superpowers. People often go into foreign entanglements without understanding anything about the local culture. The Iraq War is a classic example. The Iraq War in 2003 was an unmitigated disaster. And if there was one war without any sense of historical knowledge or consciousness, it was the Iraq War. And so we should learn from history, ideally. And history does offer you some insights. It is not predictive. It's not that history repeats itself, as the cliche goes. But it certainly does rhyme, as another cliche goes. So it is a useful discipline, because what is history but the story of human existence? And human beings are fundamentally the same or similar enough over thousands of years. Technology changes, absolutely. Social structures change, absolutely. Women have the vote today. We do not have an emperor, although some would argue against it. We now are back to the age of mini emperors, if not a big emperor. And we have new ways of thinking. Let's say 2,000 years ago in Rome, people believed in the Roman gods. And now, of course, some people may be woke, and some people may be ultra evangelical, and others may be liberal Muslim, and others may be Buddhists who sit and do meditation every day, and some others may do yoga. So we have a multiplicity of beliefs, but the fundamental things that drive human beings, power, love, jealousy, loyalty, at the same time selfishness as well as generosity. And we are complicated creatures, and I suspect William Shakespeare, not just history but literature, offers a pretty good insight into what we are like, or any great author. And so, yes, history does offer us valuable insights and offers us warnings as to what to do and what not to do. And a sense of historical knowledge, awareness, and humility might serve us very good.
Well, thank you for such a interesting introduction to it. And we will go through all of it today during our discussion. But let's start with you, because you started via Observer. It's a media organization. It's global, but it is also a community. To me, it is a community.
It is a community, very much so.
Yeah, and I met you, and I'm so grateful that you invited me to be a part of this community. I went and I joined a couple of events. It's something that I've never experienced before. Incredible group of people who really do care about not just our country, the global way of thinking and taking initiatives. What led you to create it?
So I think this is a question I've been asked many times, and I have given variants of the same answer. And I mean, the immediate trigger was when I looked at the dominant media narratives and the media organizations in various countries. Let's begin with India, where I grew up. Or for that matter, why just begin with India? Or for that matter, the UK, where the media landscape is particularly vibrant, arguably the best in the English-speaking world, the most global, the most diverse in some ways. And then why just begin there? Let's come all the way to the US, where we are right now. And the one thing that struck me even a decade and a half ago, and I had this idea in 2010, we are sitting here in 2025. So this has been a decade and a half of thinking and meeting people and working. And what struck me then, and it is even more true today, it is even truer today, was number one, you have far too much noise, and we do not look at the deeper issues behind the news. So that, for me, was problem number one. Because if we want a healthy society, if we want a functioning democracy, you've got to at least look at the big issues in the eye. And you may differ. We will differ. We will disagree. But we at least have to look at the big issues in the eye, not be drowned out by noise. So one, there is too much noise. Number two, very little context, historical or philosophical or cultural, or even economics often, even though we live in the age of the economy. And number three, we live in echo chambers, which can be ethnocentric, which can be ideological, which can be national, which can be capital-based. So now let's go back to Indian media. In India, you have a domination of Delhi over discourse, and the English-speaking media, which is 11% of the media, and it's predominantly based in Delhi, dominates. And English-speaking journalists in India look down on non-English-speaking journalists and often offer a regurgitated view which they read in The Guardian or the BBC or New York Times. And I thought, growing up as early as that, that was just crazy stupid. It was asinine. And so I was really dissatisfied with the way the Delhi media functioned. It was an echo chamber. Then I came to the UK, where things were a lot better. But during the Iraq War, The Economist made a case for the Iraq War. And The Economist was plain bloody wrong. And the reason they did so was they were trapped in their echo chamber. And they made theoretical arguments. And even though the British have run a global empire, they got caught up in the zeitgeist. And then you come to the US, and whether it was Fox News or whether it was the New York Times, both made a case for the Iraq War in 2003. And we are sitting a couple of days after 9/11's 14th anniversary. It's 2025, 2001, September 11th were the attacks. And so they got caught up in the zeitgeist. And I thought, okay, what we need to, one, focus on the deeper issues behind the news. Number two, provide context. And number three, provide many perspectives from around the world. And if we do that, then hopefully we see the world through many prisms. And hopefully we make fewer mistakes. And hopefully we build a healthier society. And that was the thinking. And obviously this sense of history was important. And I think if you push back why I came to this idea, I think I tell two stories, both from two different parts of my life. One is when I was sitting in December 2009 with my very dear friends Richard Kenny and Alexander Coward, two Oxford lads. And we were both, all three of us are still very close. And I remember I had some idea. I was thinking of an entrepreneurial idea with a Wharton professor called David Bell. And David and I were planning some startup. I don't even remember the startup. And at the end of it, my friend said, come on. And Richard often calls me Warrior Prince. And Richard said, Warrior Prince, it's bollocks. I said, why? He said, because it's not you. In Silicon Valley, people live and breathe ideas. In Silicon Valley, people really care about technology. People care about whatever little tiny problem they are solving. And I had been talking about the Iran 1953 coup. And I was talking about how it was original sin in the Middle East and how after that the US went from being seen as the land of the Atlantic Charter promising freedom to colonies to being seen as a successor to the imperial masters, Great Britain and even France. And Glenn Carl, my co-author and with whom I do a podcast called The Dialectic, Glenn and I have a full podcast on Iran, which people from around the world have loved and sent us fan mail about. We really dive deep into the history. And so going back to the point about Iran, we did the podcast, I think, this year, but I was talking about Iran in 2009, 16 years ago. And he said, you should be explaining this to us. You should be doing something in the media. You should be on television or radio or just bringing things to life, because I'm a chemist and this is what Richard said, I don't know enough about history, but I'm a citizen and I vote, and I would like to know which of my politicians are lying the most or are the least ill-informed, or which one of them in an ideal world is best informed. And of course, Alexander Coward, who's a mathematician who started teaching, I believe, at the ripe old age of 22 at Oxford, who was a prodigy and is a brilliant man, and he chimed in, and both of them said, you shouldn't be doing this. And I dropped that startup idea. And so obviously I didn't know I would do Fair Observer, but that historical emphasis, the do something that's you, stuck with me. And of course, fast forward, and I have to mention another friend who is an ex-naval officer, Israeli, Moti Levy. Out of the blue, he took me to some global media summit. I don't know who organized it. I don't even remember much as to what was discussed. It was suitably uninspiring. It had a lot of big names, and the most excruciating thing to me was that very few people had a sense of history, and those going off to cover East Africa often didn't speak the language. They were going off from Harvard or Princeton or Yale off to cover East Africa. And the chap going to India knew no Hindi, no Tamil, no Bangla, no Indian history, was asking me what books to read on Indian history and culture before going. I was just thinking, this top-down model is wrong. I came back and came up with the idea of Fair Observer initially then, and I barged into David Bell's office, and David said, great idea, mate. And then the others said, yeah, it seems like an okay idea. But I think if I have to go back to the drift of your question about history and the importance of history and the importance of looking at context, I have to go back to my childhood. And then I have to give my father, Indrapati Singh, Dr. Indrapati Singh, who was a military surgeon and who was and still is a phenomenally sharp fellow. He bought 10 volumes, children's volumes, from a visiting American ship. And even when I was young, very young, maybe 3, 4, 5, as early as that, but he started collecting children's history books. And I remember he gave us 4 children's history books, me and my brother. And of course, I read more history. I was more interested in history. And they were Indian and British, Soviet and American. Okay. So very early.
What a combination.
Very early. Yes, exactly. Indian and British, Soviet and American. And very early, I understood that all of news is fiction and all of history is mythology. Now, of course, I say that tongue in cheek, but there's an element of truth. And that importance of looking at the world through many prisms, of having that flexibility of mind and plasticity of imagination really helped me. And that has informed Fair Observer. So from my father to Moti, to Richard Kenny, to Alexander Coward, all these different characters, to David Bell, who was the first person to give me a thumbs up. Mm-hmm. And of course, I have to, mention my mother and my brother. My mother, Sudha Singh, and my brother, Amit Singh, because my mother comes from a literary tradition. So this whole gift that I have of being able to speak somewhat cogently and being able to write, and also my brother's debating background, sparring ideas with him, and he's the person who initially supported Fair Observer. That helped, and I guess I have to give a shout out to my old tutor, Michael Hart, who really honed my skills and made me rigorous, because that is the one thing I had lacked when I was in India. And today, if you look at Fair Observer, we have a timeline, the World War II timeline, and my former managing editor, Abul Hasanat Siddiq, came up with the idea, let's do a timeline. I wrote the content, he designed it, and then we upgraded it with inputs from Glenn Carl, who's a retired CIA officer, Gary Grappo, my former chair, who's a retired ambassador, former State Department diplomat. We got inputs from the Japanese, Haruko Sato, who has been an academic, a professor, a policy analyst, a geopolitical thinker in Osaka, in Japan. We got input from Andrea in Germany, and she said we had missed out ABC. And we got inputs from people from around the world, from the Japanese, from the Chinese, from the Koreans, from the Germans, from the British, from the Indians, from the Palestinians, from, of course, Americans, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the timeline we have, people who've been in senior positions in the BBC and in the senior-most positions at some of the top organizations in the world have said is the most valuable resource for young students, whether they are in high school or in university studying history or international relations, or for that matter, young people wanting to be diplomats or young military officers. So our work has been greatly informed, or my work or our work as a team has been greatly informed by a historical consciousness. And my chief strategy officer, Peter Isaacson, or Roberta Campani, my chief communications person, one based in France, the other in Geneva. We are all imbued with the historical consciousness, and so are other members of the team, like our contributing editors, Ting Gong, who has specialized in the 20s and 30s rise of Japanese authoritarianism, and we'll be doing a podcast on it very soon, T and I. And it's the same holds true for Anton Schobel. So we are, as a team, invested in the idea of engaging with the past to understand the present and drawing up scenarios for the future.
So thank you so much for summarizing it in such a great way. I want to make sure that I will bring it to the sort of like to the summary of what we are here to understand Fair Observer. So you guys are very different from any media organization that I'm personally familiar with, because you bring the world perspective. I looked at your website and I looked at your social media. You are You have writers from more than 90 countries.
Correct.
And they are all local to the local communities.
So I shouldn't make a false claim. So yes, we have more than 3,000 authors from over 90 countries, but we will often have somebody like Gary Grappo talk about the Middle East. So even if they are not living in the Middle East, they have great knowledge of the Middle East. We do not follow the top-down foreign correspondent model. That send a foreign correspondent who drinks a skinny latte and reports from Woodland in Nairobi. No, that's not a model. In fact, the New York Times had an ad for which it got attacked and pilloried, and rightly so, which was almost colonial.
Correct.
It was about, if you want like jungles and pirates, come be our Nairobi correspondent. So our goal is very much to democratize media. We are bottom up, not top down. Anyone can publish with us, but unlike social media, everyone goes through the same editorial process, including yours truly, including Peter Isaacson, our chief strategy officer, including Glenn Carl, a legendary CIA officer. Doesn't matter how big your reputation. Everyone goes through the same editorial process. So we don't say we are the biggest, we don't say we are the best, but we certainly claim that we are by far the most fact-based, well-reasoned, diverse source of views and perspectives in the world. No one combines diversity and quality the way we do.
Perfect.
You pick any American media organization, and America has some great media organizations, but they are naturally insular.
So when you create content,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you mentioned that you are very aware of the noise that is happening on social media, because to me social media can be helpful, but it also can create noise and can block a lot of perception that is happening in our society. What is your North Star when you create content and you move forward with your with the providing information for us?
So every Monday, every Friday, we have a meeting, an editorial meeting, a meeting of editors. And we discuss what is important right now. And we reach out to authors from around the world. And so there is the pull. We try to pull content. But there's also push. A lot of authors believe something is important. I just recorded David Vine, who's an expert on Chagosians or Chagosian islands. And very few people have heard of Chagos Islands. That's where Diego Garcia is. And so that's push, because, that came because he reached out. The issue is important. So it's a mix of push and pull. And our biggest test is it fact-based? Is it well-reasoned? If so, we publish. We do not care if you're a French communist. We probably disagree with you. We do not care if you're a Texan Republican. We might disagree with you too. We'll publish you. So we follow Voltaire's ideal. Supposedly Voltaire said it, I do not agree with the word you say, but I will defend unto my death your right to say so. So if you give us a fact-based, well-reasoned perspective, we'll publish it for sure.
Everybody has a voice.
Yeah.
For as long as the facts are checked.
Yeah, as long as you're right on the facts. You can't say that the sun rose in the east. That would be a stretch too far. Or the world is flat. Come on, I mean, that's hard to take in 2025.
But the most important thing, that the facts, not opinions.
Yeah, you can have an opinion, and people do have an opinion, but base it on facts.
Correct.
And yes, two people will draw very different perspectives from the facts, okay? If you are, for instance, Israeli, you'll be more concerned about Hamas, and if you are Palestinian, you'll be more concerned about the Israeli far right. And that is just natural. But, and we accept that, but at least we don't lie on the facts. That's the key.
Correct. Okay. And what I'm interested, that leads me to my next question. The follow-up question is going to be, you have people across the globe.
Yeah.
What is interesting here is how the same historical events, and you already touched on this, could be viewed from different communities across the world, or cultures, I should say, probably, right? And you probably have a lot of stories to share.
We could be sitting here till tomorrow. Okay.
Right.
So,
is there something from the real world, like a real story that you probably experience and Faye observer? That
we experience it all the time. So let's take the Middle East is very difficult. Right. Because people have differing points of view. So I'll take the example of a country called Iran.
All right.
So we publish something. The royalists in DC get mad. And they say, you're probably in the pay of the Ayatollahs. The religious people get mad. And they say, you're in the pay of the royalists. How could you say this? the leftists will get mad and say you're focused on Iran and you're not criticizing America enough. After all, original sin was America in 1953. Hardline Israelis may get upset if we publish a piece that, by an author who is, say, more sympathetic to the regime like Mehdi Alavi, and say you should not have Mehdi Alavi's piece. So, and you can look at history in different ways. So some people can say that, the royalists can say that the Shah was order of magnitude better than the current mullahs. All right, fine, that's a valid argument. The Israelis can say the mullahs are fanatical and are sworn to the destruction of Israel. Okay, I get it. Many Iranians who are sympathetic to Iran's position, or even leftists, can say, look, Iran has always been under threat right from the outset. In the 1980 to 88 war, the US backed Saddam Hussein, who used chemical weapons. So what do you expect? The US and the UK conducted the 1953 coup, and Israel has been conducting assassinations. So yes, Iran may not be great, but there's history, there's reason for them to act the way they are. And we could go on. We could go on. And different people will have different perspectives on so many historical, or for that matter, current developments. Within the US, for instance, we are sitting a few days, maybe a day or 2 after, 2 days after Charlie Kirk has been shot.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of people take the view that, on the right, take the view that the left is particularly violent. There was an attempt on Donald Trump's life. There was the assassination of a healthcare CEO, and Luigi Mangione is seen as a Christ-like figure amongst the left. And the left blames the right for violence, but in fact is inflicting violence. Now, of course, those on the left think the right is weaponizing violence against them. I have had Democrat friends WhatsApp me and say they're really scared that the right may use this as an excuse to come after them, and the right may start killing figures of the left. Editors of major media organizations in this country, or for that matter, leading professors, or for that matter, even politicians. So the same event can be viewed differently. And we saw that on the House, on the floor of the House of Representatives. The acrimony after a minute of silence was just extraordinary. So the same event can be viewed through very different prisms.
Precisely, and that goes back to the sentiment that we discussed about the noise on social media, because again, social media, the biggest tool for propaganda from both sides, right?
So there are more than two sides. There are lots of. And
when we say both sides, I'm talking about U.S., but in general,
even in the U.S., what has happened is I know Republican friends who will not say this on the record right now at all, but who have confessed to me that Charlie Kirk was a narcissist, and he was self-promoting, and he was a lightweight. But now that he's dead, he's become a martyr. And so now no one can say anything against him. And the worst thing whoever wanted him dead could have done was kill him, because they made a martyr out of him. Yeah. And even within the Republican Party, not everyone takes the same view. The same holds true for the Democrats. Yeah. There are some Democrats who actually, there was one Democrat who made a case that, because he was so volatile in his comments, maybe he deserved his death. Now, that was extremely irresponsible on the part of the Democrat. who did it. I'm forgetting his name. Let me
back.
finish the point very quickly. And so even in the Democrats, there's a range of views there. So we are curiously living in an age of fragmentation. Why? Because social media has, number one, algorithms, and they amplify what you like.
Precisely,
so they draw you in a vortex. Then social media has no fact check, no filter. Anyone can publish and just go and shoot their mouth. And algorithms can amplify that. And so people live in an era of filter bubbles and echo chambers, which means that we now live in the word of the year, I think in 2016 was post-truth. We now live in a post-truth world. And AI is making this really scary because we can pull up an image of Gandhi and Hitler together shaking hands or having coffee or even making love.
Yes. So we used to live in the world where we were talking about winners run the history. Do you remember that type? So I grew up in former Soviet Union. I'm so familiar with this.
I grew up in India. Also the same story.
Right.
We were on the Soviet side.
So now, then we move to the world that we run and we write the history because now everything is on social media.
Yeah.
So we event happens, we post it, and so to speak, there is more proof to anything that happens in the world. And that happened for a short period of time until AI came. Now within AI, we do not even know what is happening anymore because we are all living in the illusion, because we don't even did event happen or did event happen to us? And we are processing it, or we're reacting to what is kind of like this illusion that we are, so to speak, surviving around us. So that being said, and then we also add in the element to it that there is a filter of this, which is kind of an illusional world, and there is a filter of different cultures that process history differently. What is the danger of it from the historical standpoint, and where AI is going to be taking us? Do you think is there any way that we can create AI in such a way that it will help us to bring communities together, or do you think it will continue separate us?
So I'm no AI expert. So I think this is a question that a friend of mine, a Dutch friend of mine, Jan Willem van der Mint, is best placed to answer because he understands the technology a million times better than me. He's now teaching in Amsterdam and actually one of the people I turn to for questions like this. But my basic read is threefold. Number one, yes, history was always written by the winners because they had the sources, etc. But over a period of time, other narratives would bubble up. History was never entirely written by the winners, but there was a strong bias. And history is basically a record of the past, really. It's looking at the past and having a narrative. And the people who win have the resources, the knowledge, the confidence, the time to chronicle stuff. So yes, there was a bias. But you know about the Indian struggle of independence. You know about, say, the Latin American movements. So there were always other narratives bubbling. Sure, social media gave the illusion. Social media from the earliest days was an illusion that, the masses can put up everything. Sure, but the masses had no memory. And even in social media from the earliest days, what bubbled to the top and what circulated was a bit arbitrary. And those who were savvy, those who were very good at marketing, those who were good at tweaking the algorithm, not necessarily those who were true. And very soon governments started and companies started spinning on social media really well. Social media teams developed, bots developed. Now with AI, we don't even know what's whether what's circulating is true. There can be deep fake. You can conjure up photos, and the AI has hard coded many prejudices, because who's doing the coding in Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley originally comes from the government back in the 50s, correct?
Well, yes, but also look at the demography. Largely male, largely people who come from a certain view of history, a dominating view of history. And there's also the element of political correctness. They want to flatter you. So they distill down everything to the lowest common denominator, especially when it comes to history. And
so correct. And also, like, let's pedal back a little bit. Silicon Valley was created by US government back in 50s.
Sure.
You already mentioned all the bias that come with Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And now let's take a look who is sitting at the table with our government currently.
Yes, and now we have seen Silicon Valley cave in to the Trump administration.
Precisely. So can we pedal back and say that Venus create the history? Are we going back to the
answer is they have a strong bias, and that is true. And eventually we'll have to find out a way to navigate AI. But there will always be people who will look at facts, who will look at chronicles, who will look at events, and especially in the cold light of the day, they will record. There are people even right now writing diaries, they will show up. There are people even now taking photographs, they will show up. So yes, the dominant version may be that which shows up on AI, but so many other sources are around, will be around. And even 20 years, 30 years later, especially when the current political and social and economic elite falls, and elites always fall. Remember, the pharaohs fell. Percy Bysshe Shelley's poem Ozymandias is a lesson, because the reason truth bubbles up after some time, is because the old elites are dead. Look, the old elites that ran the Soviet Union are long dead. They have no power. So the Soviet lies are all exposed. So you look at the lies propagated in India by the Nehru dynasty. So the Nehru dynasty, Jawaharlal Nehru, his daughter Indira Gandhi, and then the son Rajiv Gandhi, they ruled India. They were Soviet allies, and there was a vision of history. When you landed in India, you landed at the Indira Gandhi International Airport. You went to a seminar, you went to the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Then you went to Rajiv Place in Indira Place, the old Connaught Place. And of course, that elite fell, even though it still has loyalists. And now you have Narendra Modi, and there are people who say Narendra Modi is God's gift to humanity, and he's like a living God, and he too will fall. And so history has its revenge over time. Sometimes you have to wait 100 years, but
and yet we do not learn from it, do we? And why do you think?
I think we do in some ways. Sometimes we do. Look, we are sitting in Washington, okay?
Correct.
After World War II, people in Washington did learn from history. They did not repeat the mistakes of World War I, of post-World War I. What happened after World War I? Treaty of Versailles. What did the winning allies do? They punished Germany. They punished Germany a little too much. What did that lead to? Rise of Nazism and Adolf Hitler. And John Maynard Keynes warned about it. The great British economist and Cambridge Don warned about it in his legendary book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace. And Europe unfolded exactly as Keynes predicted. And so fast forward 1945, and the US says, hang on a minute, we'll have the Marshall Plan. All right? We will not punish Japan. We will not punish Germany. We will demilitarize them, but we will make sure they are a functioning democracy. We'll make sure that we rebuild their economy. We'll make sure that they are part of our new alliance system. They created the normative order. They created the rules-based international system. And we are sitting a stone's throw from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
Correct.
That came at the end of World War II. The League of Nations was in Geneva after World War I. The United Nations was in New York. It was a radically new idea. So human beings do learn from history. And you can argue even after World War I, human beings learned from history. Women got the vote in 1920, both in the UK and the US.
That's very positive outlook. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So we learn imperfectly. We don't learn all the lessons. Now, of course, we forget the learnings. Look, the US learned its lessons in 1945, and by 1953, it did something extraordinarily stupid, conducting a coup in Iran for the British. They didn't even get the oil after the coup. They did it because they were paranoid, and it was the McCarthy years, and they saw a communist under every Bush, and they thought that Mohammad Mossadegh was a communist. And when you turn paranoid, then the results are always terrible. Joseph Stalin's purges and killings and random brutal acts of violence destroyed Russian culture. And to this day, Russians have never recovered from Joseph Stalin. Now, Joseph McCarthy, another Joseph, or Joe McCarthy, I think that was his name, if I remember correctly. McCarthyism, anyway. He was similarly paranoid, but he was toppled in a democracy. And the paranoid reign came to an end. And so the paranoia never went as far as the Soviets, but it was there here too. Some of the ills of the Soviet Union were here too. I have a friend whose grandfather suffered. He served with MacArthur, General Douglas MacArthur, in Japan, and served the nation with honor. But when he was young, he'd been to some communist gatherings, as had every other young person. And he couldn't get a job. He had to immigrate all the way, I believe, to California. And this is a story of many an American family. So we learn from history, but then we forget sometimes and we repeat the mistakes. But on the whole, I believe that we can and we do learn from history from time to time, intermittently. And during dark times, I believe those of us who have a sense of history, who have a sense of time, and who care about society, and who have a sense of civic duty, have to keep aloft and alight that flame when the wind is howling and the rain is pouring, as it is right now.
Right. And that leads me to think maybe we are learning, as you're saying, from the history from time to time, but somehow we are not connecting it together. Because again, maybe we have different cultures, different communities, and somehow we do not want to learn from each other. That leads me to my next question. I saw your very interesting podcast on the rise of white right on the
2016.
16, yes.
The global rise of the far right.
Yes.
That's my talk at Google, yes.
Yeah,
thank you. It's an hour long.
Yeah, that was a very good one, interesting one. And you were seeing this almost 10 years ago. You talked about it.
Yeah.
And
I wrote The Age of Donald Trump, I believe, on June 28, 2016. So I wrote about this,
that leads me to the conversation again. Learning from history, you're a historian, you probably saw it coming before any of us could predict it.
A lot of people did, I shouldn't claim. And I'm not a historian, I am a lover of history. I have to write a few books to claim that title as a historian, which my father keeps pointing out. I haven't done enough yet.
Which I know that you're thinking about, because you and I talked about the fact that you want to connect 3D, what was that? Religion, culture, economics, and kind of like how it all syncs together.
How things work together.
Yes,
indeed.
that is a good one.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about, and our listeners, of course, what led you to come with this prediction in your, I understand that several people were talking about the same, but your conclusion?
So I think 4 or 5 factors led to it. One, of course, if you study history and you see the rise of demagogues from time to time, there are patterns. So number one was it fit a historical pattern. And what is the pattern? There's a sense of pain, and it is unaddressed pain, and the pain is coming from complex social, economic, and political forces. And the existing elites are unable to respond to that pain. They've lost touch with the masses. And that I said the first reason was failure of elites. And I think, so number one was seeing a historical pattern. Number two, I was going through a very hard time economically. I was broke. I was staying with in a car mechanic's garage. There was a car mechanic named Amar Singh, who is no more. And I'm forgetting his last name, but he ended up giving me shelter. Not a single Indian working for Google offered me help. So it was very interesting, although I knew quite a few Indians in Google doing rather well. But it was this car mechanic running a car repair shop, a US auto repair center, and it was in Belmont. So I had absolutely no cash at that point, and I was often sleeping on the floor on a sleeping bag, and I was meeting the poorer sections of society, all the way from Mexicans to welders to painters, and I could sense the simmering rage. So one was my own personal hardship, because I had fallen out of my class, because let's be honest, America does have an invisible class system. So that was eye-opening. Number three, I was traveling, and I was traveling not in hotels, not in fancy Airbnb apartments. I was traveling and I was traveling through buses, through trains, through cheap buses, cheap trains, taking the late night, overnight, and meeting a lot of working class people. And I was going to places. I was going to across the border from California to Arizona. I was going to Colorado. I was going driving all the way through the South. In fact, I drove across the country twice. Twice I had done already by 2010, but I had been to Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I had been to small town South Dakota, North Dakota. I had gone through the Great Lakes, the Midwest. So I had met farmers, and I had met welders. I had met machine workers, or and there was real pain in America. And yes, the glib who often talk on NPR can say that, and of course Hillary Clinton's very unfortunate comment about the deplorables, that they had a sense of entitlement and they benefited from the American domination after World War II, and now tough luck, they are suffering because others are working harder. But I could see that suffering was real. And there was a double standard in the American elite, because no one has benefited more from the American elite in globalization. Why? Because let's say you're a shareholder. Let's say you have a lot of money. If the factories move to China, labor costs go down. If the call centers go to India, labor costs go down. All right? So your returns go up. If you're a CEO, your salaries go up. And then at least you have some compassion. Even if you don't feel it, express it. But there was this sense of hubris. So that brings me on to the fourth point. I'm jumping the gun. So number one, of course, I said historical patterns. Number two, I said, of course, personal hardship. Number three, travels across America. I used to call it, and still call it, a grand and glorious country. Number four, because I had fallen out of my class, but because of my education, not entirely out of my class. After all, I went to Oxford, I went to Wharton. I would meet people, and I found their arrogance insufferable. Their sense of entitlement insufferable. A lot of people who were venture capitalists were skiing, say, from Friday to Monday. They'd be in office only Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I think one of the founders of Reddit, Steve Huffman, it was, he was kind enough to make time to speak with me, but he told me that Fair Observer was a vanity project, and because I didn't have views, I should shut it down. And this is a view I got told again and again and again in Silicon Valley, that what I was doing was A, meaningless, B, unimpactful, C, in any case, no one cares about the news, because the important thing to do is to focus on coding, because I can help the world by solving a finite problem. So one software chap told me that he doesn't read the news. This is in those days. I said, why? And he told me that he's a nice guy, actually. He said that because the news disturbs him, and then he can't do his job as well. So he spends his time hiking or sailing or doing yoga and meditating, and that makes him a better coder, and then he can make a better product, and then he serves society better. Sure, but that takes out the element of citizenship in a democracy. Because if you don't want to even think about social problems, you want to solve a finite technical problem, then you will never address a social concern, and then you're no longer a citizen. And being a citizen is not just about having rights, but also responsibilities. And the elite had no sense of noblesse oblige. And now let me talk about some of my Wharton friends. And some of them were so brazen, they would make a case for carried interests. If you're a hedge fund manager, you get taxed at 15%. Your income, you're just managing money, but your income is seen as investment income. And so you get taxed at 15%, or maybe it's a little more now, which is ridiculously unfair. Let's say you're an entrepreneur and you make a salary. Let's say you are a surgeon. Let's say you're a fireman. Let's say you're a policeman. Let's say you're a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting taxed at a higher rate. And so the entitlement and arrogance was upsetting me. And I thought, if it's upsetting me, and I'm relatively far more privileged than the white working class chap I have met in, Wisconsin, all right, then it's surely upsetting other people. And by the way, it was because
so
as
I want to.
I'll finish. I'll give you the fifth reason, and the fifth reason was that I was seeing how Donald Trump was connecting with the audience in a way that Hillary Clinton wasn't.
Good. That's good. My question is, though, it wasn't just in U.S. The right wing.
The far right. It was the global
right.
right.
Yeah. The right wing sort of global trend started back 10 years ago and started spreading globally.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think, as I said in that talk, I say number one reason I give is the failure of elites. The elites.
Globally.
Yes, absolutely. And especially the Western elites. There was deindustrialization of the West. There is an economics paper called China Shock. People poo-pooed it and said that, oh, everything will be fine. There was a financialization of the economy, which was awful. Now, even people on the right, the Times had a podcast about private equity taking over. Look at what has happened through private ownership of water companies in the UK. So that was a terrible trend. I think what happened is after the victory in the Cold War, 1991, the sense of restraint went away in Western societies. In a strange way, the Soviet Union was like the devil who was keeping the Western elites honest. They had to offer a better alternative because otherwise there was this fear that their people would turn communist. Once communism falls, there is no restraint. And look at how both the Republicans and Democrats, it's under Bill Clinton that you get the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act in 1999. And that basically says that now the wall between investment banking and banking, which is personal banking. You deposit your money in a bank, is gone. One is about prudence and the other is about risk. And now you're saying you can play footsie with people's savings. So I think the Western elites got greedy, they got selfish, they got short-sighted, and they got hubristic. And they also, on top of it, became patronizing, and they became preachy. And we therefore then had an age of anger, fear, and even in some cases terror. Now, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that it's just the discontent, but and of course, opportunists on the right used it, as they always have. Mussolini was responding to real problems in Italian society. Benito Mussolini was one of the most charismatic politicians of his era. Now, talking about history, I play videos for kids, 16, 17, 18, or they're not exactly kids, or even older, youngest people, up to 22, 25 even sometimes. I play them a video of Benito Mussolini giving that classic speech with his uniform and cap with a braid, hanging from the cap. And everyone laughs when they listen to Mussolini, without exception, whether it is Japan or whether it is California or whether it is India or whether it is Africa. Regardless of the skin color, regardless of the culture, regardless of which part of the world I am, everyone laughs at Mussolini. And I stop the video and I say, guys, you're all laughing. But he managed to win. So what was it that made people follow him? Well, some say he made the trains run on time, probably true. Some say, he was, that resonated, that rhetoric. He appealed to nostalgia of the Roman Empire. Of course, Italy couldn't even beat Ethiopia in war. Italians were a joke, as my Italian friend said, the British attacked and the sailors were eating pasta with the mama, and the fleet was at the bottom of the harbor on day one. Huh? So the Italians were a disgrace in World War II. Everyone who studied military history knows that. But the people were voting for nostalgia. They were voting in anger. They were dissatisfied, and it was a time of great transition, and Benito Mussolini took full advantage of it. And interestingly, I also show videos of Hitler, Nuremberg rally. No one laughs. Everyone basically goes, oh shit, this is serious stuff. So you had two forms of authoritarian leaders. One a bit of a joker, disorganized, chaotic, who basically promised nostalgia and wasn't that dangerous. And the other, clinical, industrial, organized, that would lead to the Holocaust, that would lead to the invasion of France and Belgium and Eastern Europe, where so many Slavs were considered Untermenschen, subhumans, Lebensraum, living space. And so even then you got a whole palette of ideas of the far right. And Franco was a different beast. Salazar in Portugal was a different beast. So if you look at what's happening now, you have a whole range of opportunists. Donald Trump is one, Nigel Farage is one, another in the UK. The AFD leader, I'm forgetting her name, her girlfriend, she's lesbian. Her girlfriend is Sri Lankan. She's another. You have a whole mix, perhaps even more diverse now, because life is a bit more diverse and complex than even before. And we are seeing this upheaval, and this upheaval came because, as I said, after 1991, a lot of people were suffering, and the elites were drinking champagne at Davos. The Davos set just lost the plot, and they were flaunting their wealth a little too much. And as I said, carried interest in a lot of things built up. And the reactions always, remember, in the 1920s and 30s in Germany, It wasn't just the Nazis who rose up. Also the communists, Rosa Luxemburg.
So
The left rose up
we-
too. So people went to extremes.
So we are definitely globally
Yeah.
have been on this trend for 10 years now.
Yes.
And if you go back, you're absolutely right. We have been on this trend in the beginning of the century, last century.
Correct. 100
So
years ago, roughly.
100 years ago. Then we sort of recovered from it.
Yes.
Now we are back.
Yeah.
You did say that history doesn't repeat itself.
But it rhymes.
Yeah, but somehow we are kind of go through those periods. We don't learn, but we learn some. Some cultures repeat something, so it's kind of I don't know, random. Is it random or we are learning?
There is some degree of randomness. There's some learning. So look, we haven't gone back to people marching. Donald Trump's parade wasn't like any parade that Hitler or Mussolini had. Okay, you don't have brown shirts yet, right?
Yeah.
So we have to take a little bit of a even in Britain, Nigel Farage is not like Oswald Mosley, who was weird and had black shirts and military uniforms. So I think we have learned to some degree. I don't think people are willing to send their children to war at mass level. So we've learned something.
I don't know what to tell you, Atul. I'm looking at other parts of the world. Like that's what we are discussing, right? So maybe different communities are not learning from other communities on a global level.
Yeah.
The question is, so what do you think is next?
If I knew that, I'd be Nostradamus, or maybe I should start a hedge fund.
You probably would be rich, right?
I could start a hedge fund and start buying options. I think we are in for a very difficult phase. I think
So you're saying it's going to get worse
before it gets better.
Yeah.
I think economically, what are we seeing? Let's start. The Japanese government has fallen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, even as we speak, the Nepalese government has fallen. The parliament was on fire. And it was a communist government. The people overthrew the monarchy, then they elected communists. Now they've overthrown communists. Before that, Bangladesh fell. Before that, Sri Lanka fell. India is in acute crisis. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not liked within his own party because he's run the country through bureaucrats.
I'll tell you one thing is very consistent here, my friend. Putin is not going anywhere.
That is true. Vladimir Putin is
This
here
man
to
just
stay.
like he's so steady and consistent.
True. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin actually seem like the grown-ups. They are behaving less erratically than other leaders. You get to the Iranian regime, that is brittle. You get to Israel and they are conducting lots of attacks against Hamas, whether it is Gaza or West Bank or Qatar, which is causing enormous anger in much of the world, especially the Muslim world. But internally, it's a divided society. Israel is in some ways on the verge of a civil war. The secular Israelis are now sick and tired of the fanatical far-right members of Bibi Netanyahu's cabinet. You move a further east, Iran is in crisis. The women, a large number of women are sick and tired of being told to wear a headscarf or whatnot and having restrictions. In the Gulf, things seem to be all right, but you never know when things may blow up. Yemen is in interminable civil war.
Yeah.
Africa, what's happening in Sudan? I mean, Africa, Democratic Republic of Congo, Chad, 90 to 95% of Lake Chad is gone. Let's get to Europe. The French government fell.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what a historic week to do this podcast, this interview. I mean, they haven't been able to.
So how far worse can it go?
Peter Mandelson is gone, the ambassador here, because of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And he went after Angela Rayner went in the UK, the deputy prime minister. So how far can this go? I think we'll have massive economic meltdown, massive economic pain. The current spending of Western countries is unsustainable. Only a mix of increased taxes and reduced spending will work. Social security can't be 65 years. It has to go up. And that needs both the left and the right, or the many factions of the left and the many factions of the right, to come together. You cannot have $37 trillion of debt and devalue the dollar, and the dollar is devalued by, 25, 30. I haven't looked. 30% against gold. So fiscally, the situation is unsustainable. The institutions are creaking. It is a bit like, I've always argued, and here I disagree with Neil Ferguson. Neil Ferguson was at Oxford when I was an undergrad. And he's a brilliant man, and he's much more famous than me, and he's a historian. I'm just a wannabe. And Neil keeps saying we are living in another Cold War, and it is China and the US. And I keep pointing out that actually we are living in an era which is similar to pre-World War I. It's not just me. There are a few of us making this argument. The whole system is untenable. The rules-based order has crumbled. The normative order has collapsed. The US itself has spiked the World Trade Organization. The US itself has imposed tariffs. The US has decided to devalue the dollar, and everyone is talking about Mar-a-Lago Accords, which is basically everyone agrees to it. But the US is powerful, but not all powerful. And I think we could be looking at an era of inflation. Currencies could really crumble. We could be looking at an era of stagflation. Could be stagnation, very few jobs. We could be looking at an era of rising inequality and social tensions. The killings that have already started. We've had some killings in this country. They could amplify. We could have social disorder on the streets. What you're seeing in the UK and what you're seeing in France is not something that is out of the ordinary. And on top of that, there is the issue of religious and ethnic differences. How does Europe incorporate immigrants from Islamic backgrounds who have very strong faith? And in Islam, there is no distinction between church and state. And so how does a secular society, particularly in Western Europe, digest Islam? And these are all unresolved, unanswered questions. And we will live through a lot of pain before we see any gain. That is how I see it, because it's back to, almost the pre-World War I era, wherein it is a mix of the 20s and 30s to some degree, but when the old order of empires was clearly going to break. You see, at the end of World War I, we say World War I was terrible, and it was terrible. So many dead. Mm-hmm. A quarter of the estates in the UK didn't have heirs. The men were all dead. But at the end of World War I, basically the Austro-Hungarian Empire has gone, and the Russian Empire has gone. And at the end of World War II, basically all empires are pretty much going, if not gone. And they do go. The French are out of Vietnam. The British are out of India. The British go on to lose, most of the other colonies. They lose Hong Kong finally in 1997, but the die is cast. And so that old order it takes a while for it to entirely disappear. But the old order in 1914 was clearly ending. And the old order we've had from 1945 has ended. We don't know what comes next. We'll have to figure it out. We'll have to figure out a new kind of democracy. And we'll have to think long, we'll have to think deep, and we'll have to think hard. And I'm afraid we are living in the age of Maya, the Indian word, the Sanskrit word, this complete set of web of illusion where this mind is in Brownian motion. So am I optimistic in the long run? Yeah, on the whole, human beings are clever apes, and if we don't end up in nuclear war, we'll be all right. And we have sanitation, and we have modern healthcare, and we are living longer, and human beings are taller, and women have contraception. They are not perpetually pregnant. So lots of good things. In the long run, we should be all right, but we will live through some pain, because the way we organize societies and the way we divide resources, there have to be some fundamental shifts there.
Yeah, describe it pretty dark, with the exception that some of the members of our government look at women the way that we should be going back to the past and destroying contraceptions. You probably saw that article.
Now, maybe they are inspired by the Iranian mullahs. The next thing they will ask you to do is wear a headscarf.
I wouldn't be surprised. So let's take a look. So I was listening to you, and I have got this idea that in addition to everything that you're saying, I think that you kind of like went back to the First World War, and then you connected all the things, how kind of like our society on a global level had this deep dive, and then we started moving up. In addition to that, I think what I am observing right now is that, of course, we have AI, just throw AI into it, and cryptocurrency into it, and then look at the fact that globally, not just in US, people started sort of losing this trust and belief in the government. And the government itself does not sort of communicate on the level of government to government or government institution to government institution, but more as a relationship towards person to person. Because I'm looking at Trump administration, I'm seeing it within Putin administration, and before that it was, and I see it a little bit in Europe too, but less so. For instance, before that it was U.S. foreign policy with the Russian foreign policy, with the European foreign policy. And no matter who is the president comes and goes, but there is a foreign policy, and it keeps kind of like the tradition follows. More or less administration changes, but if there is an established policy, we continue going through it. Even so, again, like little tiny things can be changed because of the Democrats or Republicans, but there is an established relationship between the countries. Now, what I'm seeing is that President Trump came, and because President Trump or President Putin or, I don't know, the president of Finland plays golf with the President Trump, and they have personal relationship, that will completely change how the countries operate. I don't know. It's like, do we go back to medieval times when they're like families, because like one family in Europe has a better relationship with another family in Europe. Okay, we will just, the countries will deal accordingly. So that's one thing I am seeing. Another thing that I'm seeing is that people, maybe it's just in the beginning of the trend, and maybe it will change, because people do not have a trust in the government. They might be switching more to the digital currency, because digital currency is not so much associated with the government. And so I see more and more people investing in crypto. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I see it as a trend. And so in addition to everything I'm saying, you said, I'm just throwing these two things. So like the government's more relying on the personal relationship, whoever is running the government, the families, so to speak. It's like almost back to medieval times. And then, of course, people within the societies do not trust the government, and so they are switching to different currencies, and nobody is operating, or there are no standards for those sort of for those currencies at the moment, at least. And there is no government that is going to be creating standards for this. So that might work out or might not work out because level of uncertainty, in addition to all those other very dark times that are leading us to. So I do not know. It's kind of scary a little bit. I do know that we will bounce for all the reasons that you describe, but I think we need to buckle up.
Yeah, I agree. And on that point, that are we becoming more medieval? In some ways, yes. But then we have medieval era inequality now. So some people have a lot of power. There's a lot of money in politics now.
Right.
And once you get so much money in politics, and institutions have weakened. And institutions have weakened because there have many reasons, but also because there's been a thickening of processes. So the letter of the law has become more important than the spirit of the law, and this has been happening for a while. And so if you follow institutions, often nothing gets done. Everything is lost in bureaucraties. A decision by committee means nothing gets done. And so the appeal of a strong man has become more powerful because strong man promises simple solutions to complex problems, and a lot of people like it, like something is being done. And it is indubitably true that, a little bit of what you're seeing, not just here in the US, but let's take an example of Putin. Putin is a modern-day czar. Vladimir Putin is a modern-day czar. Xi Jinping is a modern-day emperor. Narendra Modi is a Maharaja. It's a modern-day Maharaja. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is a sultan, or sultan, if you want to use the English pronunciation. Emmanuel Macron is le roi de France, the king of France, or the emperor, l'empereur. He'd like to be Napoleon, although he has no power really, because he can't even have a government that lasts. He can't even pass a budget. But he certainly has imperial pretensions. And so in Europe, that is less likely to. Europe is not yet medieval. Europe has other problems. It's an aging continent, debt-ridden continent, bureaucraties. But a lot of the world, and I haven't even started about Africa, Africa just has strong men, and a lot of people prefer, there were coups in Africa. And I know it from African friends and friends in the World Bank who've dealt with those parts of the world, that these coups were popular because democracy was so corrupt and so dysfunctional. In Nepal, for instance, an elected government has been booted out because it was so corrupt. So we are living in a strange time because society has, in a way, disintegrated. Because in a democracy, government is supposed to represent the people, right? You and I get together and we are too busy. You've got your business to run. I've got my publication and other stuff to do. So we say, okay, let's select X to represent us. Because the daily business of government is difficult and boring and taxing. But when a group of people cannot come together to agree, because democracy rests on two opposing tendencies, balance, achieving a fine balance. You could say there's the apple, there's a worm in the apple right at the outset. What is one? One is there needs to be a diversity of ideas, right? That's democracy. You debate, you discuss, you come up with legislation, with decision. But on the other hand, you need to have some unity of purpose and culture and common beliefs. Okay, we agree upon the Constitution, and we agree upon what the Constitution means. But once that collapses, then democracy becomes dysfunctional, and then you get this medieval style of government. And we are certainly seeing that, and that is worrying. And you talked about cryptocurrencies. Yes, of course. They could turn out to be excellent because governments cannot print them and devalue them, but they could also turn out to be another bubble because in large parts of the world, you cannot buy bread. And there's another, phenomenon happening over the last few months, especially the last 6 months. Look at how everyone is flocking to gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. So many things are happening at the same time. Crypto is happening, sure. AI is happening, sure. But at the same time, in large parts of the world, the basics, and we have seen a lot of floods recently and natural disasters.
True.
I wouldn't be surprised if people go back to, worrying about food and
It's already happening.
and start paying
very
in
happening.
gold in certain parts of the world or
But
silver.
they are buying
Yeah.
gold, they are buying silver.
Yeah.
I've been talking to my friends in different parts of Middle East and Africa. That's what they can be investing, because some of them cannot invest into the same stocks and securities that we are doing it here in US and Western Europe.
Yeah. And by the way, gold has given you a better rate of return than anything else this year.
Correct. Well, let's finish it on the positive note, because we do know that we bounce back. With humans, we bounce back no matter what.
And
We
look
are
at the
very
positive. Look
creative.
at the positive side.
Yeah.
At the end of World War I, women got the vote.
True.
At
yes.
the end of World War II, number of colonies got their independence, and women in France got the vote. The French
So
always.
give me three positive after the last deep
Yeah.
on a global level, because one of the important thing for me is that we don't want to just talk about US,
Yeah.
because we have listeners in globally.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in Middle East, we have people in Egypt, we have people in South America, in Europe, of course, even Russia, I realized. So let's give our global communities something to look forward to, because yes, we describe some very dark times right now, but we know that globally, historically, we as humans had multiple dark times and deep down, and then we bounce back. But every time when we bounce back, it gets better. It always gets better.
Yeah.
The very last one was First World War.
Or Second World War.
Second World War. And then it just gets better. I am a believer that it always gets better.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't always. It's not a linear line. It goes like this. But on the whole, we've been upward, especially for the past 500 years.
Precisely. But what I'm saying is that, and I should say, not but, and in addition to what you are saying is, when we come back, we get back better, stronger, more creative, more resilient. Look at the pandemic. It was horrible. People died. But we are in a better place.
To some degree. Not entirely. Inequality is worse because of the pandemic.
True,
so some things,
True. And we are still recovering. We learned a lot.
Yeah.
So if you could give me 3 highlights that we should be looking forward to after those dark times that you and I elaborated quite in a detailed way for our listeners.
I would say that once we get out of the dark times, I think we will see a reinvention of government. Maybe some borders will change, maybe some new countries will emerge, but we'll certainly see that political culture. We'll see a re-engagement of citizens in governing themselves, at least in some parts of the world.
Okay.
That'll certainly happen because people are starting to get interested and invested. They won't just be consumers, they will be citizens. Like the Silicon Valley programmer who does yoga and codes may not need to code because of AI now. And at some point, as he grows older and he has kids, he'll have to think about, okay, what sort of schools should they go to? So I think one thing to look forward to is certainly that there'll be more engagement. I think number 2, I think what people fail to understand, either from the left and right, the left is, oh, the rich have an evil conspiracy and they are capitalism is evil and we are being shafted. Okay, maybe an element of truth, certainly an element of truth. The right, everyone is lazy. We are the taxpayers are subsidizing everyone else and we'll go broke. Well, there's an element of truth when it comes to going broke. There's also an element of truth to a lot of people, being lazy or government being ineffective. So the binary left and right division about economics, what it fails to realize is a lot of printing of money made a lot of people rich. So if you own assets, you didn't do any work. It was loose monetary policy that made you relatively very rich in dollar terms or euro terms. And what we will see after the next crisis is a rationalization of fiscal and monetary policy, meaning that governments will have to spend more wisely and tax more wisely. Right now, both spending and taxing are ridiculously irrational. And in this country, for instance, it's the Democrats and Republicans. In India, it is the middle class that politicians squeeze to give freebies to win the next election. So is it true that India has crony capitalism? Yes. But is it true also that India is practicing Sanatan socialism, as I call it? Sanatan Dharma is the term for Hinduism, and Sanatan socialism. Yes, both are true at the same time. So they'll have to rationalize, in the sense they will have to spend more responsibly, more for long-term things than freebies, tax, and be more accountable. So we will see that, because people will ask for more accountability after a crisis. So there'll probably be a lowering of corruption of the elites. We are living in a golden age of corruption globally.
This is definitely good things to look forward to. So we are talking about reorganization of the government,
of the engagement of citizens, and reorganization of governments, and 2, rationalization of economic policy, number 2. And I think 3, what we will see is, after all the hype and hoopla of AI dies, I think a re-evaluation of education, because I'm ending on education, because education is what builds the future generation. And in many countries, it has become a racket. And what do I mean by a racket? The Harvards and the Yales and others have huge endowments and massive fees. But are they really teaching something useful? They have become like corrupt monasteries in the Middle Ages. And similarly, at the school level, this fixation on teach everyone AI. I mean, for Christ's sake, many countries, including the UK, have a shortage of plumbers. And plumbing is a very important job, an honorable job. And people need plumbers if they are going to live in cities. And even if they don't live in cities, they will need plumbers. So, this re-questioning of what is education. On the one hand, people need practical skills, and there are lots of professions that are understaffed because we've developed a class system around the world wherein we look down on working class jobs, and we'll have to change that. And at the same time, we'll have to move beyond AI. AI is not everything, and start having more of a humanities education wherein we wonder, just as the founding fathers of this country did when they wrote the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. We'll have to, education will have to be about what is, or the Alexander von Humboldt tradition, what is the purpose of life? How do we live in a society? Where should the balance of rights and responsibilities lie? What can history teach us? What do we learn from our philosophy? How do we create, a more peaceful, tolerant world? How do we reconcile someone who's religious with someone who's secular? How do we reconcile the different religions? How do we address fundamentalism of any sort, whether of ideology, whether it is woke ideology, which says that transgender women should compete with women, even when women athletes oppose it. A lot of women say, let's create a separate category. And then if you said that in the woke era, people turned on you as an evil person. Even if you believe that is evil, you can't turn on people and that way. And I think that intolerance comes fundamentally from poor education. I think the third thing that will happen is a reinvention of education at a social level, because right now what we are seeing is a decline in education, particularly which is social, because education has become like privately owned media. It lies behind walled gardens. Anyone with money now anywhere in the world is sending their kid to private schools, which is fine. Britain has pioneered it in some ways. But if there's an excess of it, then you don't have a common understanding or somewhat common understanding. And every country will have to create some kind of education system that responds to the needs, practical needs of society at, on one end, and two, creates some kind of common ideals and awareness and some kind of cohesion, which a 14th century Arab philosopher Ibn Khaldun called a sabia, because we will need some social cohesion. And I think that is something to look forward to. It'll come.
It will, absolutely. And we humans, we are very social species.
Yes.
We can't survive without can't survive without each other. And on that note, I want to thank you, because what you are doing, you're creating just that.
Thank
Because
you.
I do truly believe that Fair Observer, your mission, your focus is creating that community that brings that education. And I've been a part of it proudly now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for all our listeners, we will provide links to Fair Observer.
Thank you.
And there is actually gathering once a month, right?
Yeah, we have it in many cities, in New York, in Washington. And if you want to do a meetup in your city, just let us know.
Yes.
And we'll announce it. So we want meetups around the world in different cities, and get together, talk about anything, talk about how do you have a better school, how could you learn from, say, Finland, that seems to have had success in their education system, or how you could have better, say, plumbers as the Germans seem to have. Or the Poles.
It's incredible. Again, we started this podcast with the idea that we want to celebrate the leaders who bring positive impact to local communities. And I think this is one of the best examples that we brought so far. Again, follow Atul and Fair Observer on social media. We will provide the links. But there are also in-person meetings once a month, and those meetings are global. I join one in Washington DC, but you can find a place that are local to your community.
And you can organize too. Just reach out to us.
Precisely. Reach out to Atul, and they will help you to organize those meetings in your city, in your town, and you can discuss how you can improve your local community. Again, thank you, Atul, so much for joining us today, and thank you for helping us to grow our Connected Conversations community and making our world a better place. Thank you, Atul.
Thank you. Thanks you very much.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in into Connected Conversation. We truly value your feedback and would love to hear from you. Please let us know what story you would like to hear next. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Let's keep the conversation going, and let's continue to inspire each other. Let's stay in touch. Thank you.